Hello, and welcome to today's interview with Marten Persiel. He's the director of the film Everything Will Change, which was released in 2021, which reflects on environmental issues. My name is Maria, and I'm reporting from the European Film Club. My first question for you, Martin, is with the themes and messages that are present in this film, which ones do you feel are the most relevant and important to keep in mind right now?
So the film deals with biodiversity, and we try to keep the idea of biodiversity and the idea of climate change a little bit separate in order to understand both. Of course, they're interlinked, but they are also each their own issue. And I think the message that I tried to put into the film, and the message that I would hope that a lot of people could get on board with, is the idea that right now is a beautiful time. It's a beautiful time full of opportunities that, seen from the future, people will notice that. They will say, the 20s, the zeros, the 10s, the 20s was a time when the Great Barrier Reef was still half intact, when we still had parts of the Amazon, when we still had millions of species around. And of course, while we were living the time, it seemed like a terrible time. There were wars, there were COVID, there were all kinds of problems. So it seemed like the worst time to be alive. But in terms of nature and the beauty that still surrounds us, it is a beautiful time. And I would love the audience and the people in general to understand that there is something to be lost, and it's all around us. And the sooner we notice how beautiful it is and how special it is and how fragile, the better. That's kind of the message of the film.
Do you feel there's much negativity towards the options available to us to tackle climate change in society?
I find it really hard to answer, because if you do look at the science around it, it's really hard not to get very pessimistic. And that's the truth. I think the closer you look at what's going on, the closer you follow, the more depressed you have all the reason to be. And this is a real problem. And I appreciate that as well. It's really hard to keep a positive, hopeful outlook when you realize that the science says another thing. And I'm not a big fan of trying to sugarcoat it and pretend that it's going to be all right, because it's not going to be all right. It's going to change. This is the title of my film. It's something that really came out of a lot of research. Things are going to change. We will never have the paradise of the past. And this, sooner we understand that, the better. And so in terms of positive outlook, I think what I'm excited about is to shape what's coming. For example, literacy, so the amount of people who can read and write and use the internet, is on the rise. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great time for us to talk to each other and find solutions. And yes, we will not return to the paradise of the past, but we might arrive at a place of real understanding. And that would be something very positive, I think.
I felt that the film did have a lot of different techniques in it. Like there was some animation at some point. How was it for you to mix these different tools?
It's something I really like. This is my second film for cinema. The first one also had animation and found footage and real stuff and fictionalized scenes all mixed into one big messy mosaic of of aesthetics. And this one is a little bit more organized, but yeah, it's just, I like it. I'm the hip hop generation, so mix and match and sample and remake is kind of what I'm into.
Something that I loved about your film was that it connected the future with the past. And by past, I mean a little bit the homemade feel of fairy tales. And I really like that. Would you elaborate on it?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks that you say that you like it, and I've seen it work on some people, and not on some others. They didn't like it so much. For example, even people from my team, they said, like, why don't you cut away that fairy tale aspect. It's like an extra layer. Why do we need the fairy tale if we already have a science fiction story and a documentary? And I sort of insisted on keeping it because I think it also does its thing. You like it? No, because the science fiction, it's a time travel kind of story set in the future, and they look back at their past, which is our present. This is how the film works. And what I was hoping to do there is to create a nostalgic view onto our presence, like we said in the very beginning, to go nostalgically and say, wow, the golden era, the wonderful golden era of the 2020s, which is such a hard thing to do right now because everything looks like it's fucked. But it's possible. And the more you imagine the future, the more you can imagine, well, these times might be remembered as a beautiful time. So that was the reason why I did that. And the fairy tale. So in the film, there's a fairy tale narrator that sort of bookends the story and comments on the story sometimes, is because what I would love to achieve in the viewer and also a big part of my own worldview is to marvel, to look at things and go, wow, this is inexplicably beautiful. No, that you have animals. For example, the film starts with a giraffe thing. No, for those who haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it, but a giraffe plays a big part in the beginning of the film. And so when you see a giraffe in the zoo or something, which of course I did that when I was writing the film, I went to visit the giraffes for real. It's inexplicable. It's amazing. It doesn't seem to make genetic sense. Like it's so big and it's so unwieldy and it moves in such a funny way. And all you're left to do is marvel. You look at it, you cannot explain it. Even with the Darwinism, it's hard to say, like, how could that animal evolve to do that just because it's going to reach that one plant up there on the tree, which apparently is the reason. But it's just, for me, inexplicable, and it's marvelous, and it's like a fairy tale. And this happens a lot. When you look at wild nature, there's all these marvelous fairy tale things that I find hard to explain other than with magic. So that's why the fairy tale.
I completely agree. For me, the fairy tale just had that layer of magic that it's present when you're a child and you think that everything is possible. So I do think that it strengthens the thematic here. Was it hard? Because I feel that besides the science fiction, there's also a very documentary language in the film. Was it difficult to balance both?
The person who would be able to give a better answer here is the editor. I had two. It's Maxine Gödecke and Bobby Good. They're both in Berlin. They're both very experienced editors. Maxine edits all the films by Wim Wenders. She also, Wim Wenders also was part of the project. And so these are people who are really good editors, but they were both a little bit scared of that, of that mission that we're going to mix a completely made up science fictional fairy tale world with a real documentary discourse, like a scientific discourse where you're supposed to believe what is being said. Some people have said, hey, and now you're taking me on a journey that's fictional and it's set in the future. And now in the next minute, I'm supposed to really give credit to what the film says. How can I do this? And how can I make this step? We've had a lot of screenings in schools and universities also when the film first came out. And the reactions there were never critical of the style. They were always like, yeah, I got it. Part of it, this is the documentary part, this is the fiction part, this is the animation. I get it. I read it. Whereas some older audiences had that problem. They said like, oh, I was missing this, that it's one shape and I can get into this universe and be there and understand it all as one piece. And they had more problems with it. So I think it's a question of visual language, which is evolving and changing. And I think people are nowadays much more capable to decode and much more distrustful of images, which also the film talks about. In the beginning, there's a film where they find, now I'm going to spoil a little bit, they find an old image of a giraffe on a videotape. And then it's three friends and two of them go like, yeah, this got to be fake. Look at this long neck, weird animal. That's got to be some Mid-Journey stuff. And one of them says, well, but what if it is real though? What if this is not fake AI imagery, but actual real photography? And that's how the film starts. That's kind of the kicker for the film. There's a thing between fake images and believable images that I think is going to get very interesting also in the future.
Talking about image, I noticed the incredible use of color throughout the film. As in the future, we have this contrast between this reddish orange with the blue and the. Would you talk to me a little about how you did your palette?
Just before we started preparing for this movie, these kids from California, young kids, had developed a filter for a camera that you could have an infrared aesthetic, but in color, and still have normal skin tones. And like most colors are normal, but everything that's alive and green, this is based on chlorophyll, on this stuff that's in the green leaf, comes out red. So crazy. And then we made a test, and it was very obvious that we said that the whole film has to be in this style, because it's basically like the camera turns into a scientific instrument where through the camera you can see everything that's alive, and it's going to be red. And then there were some really cool moments. So, for example, then we had also a drone that had the same technology built in, and we could fly over this. We flew over this desert in Spain, like a very dry area with dried up lakes. And with a naked eye, it looked like just sand color, all white or all kind of like beige. And through the drone infrared, you could see all these red lines going through the desert, because there was still some organic matter, some like a little bit rest of life from when it used to be a lake. And you could see it in the camera. It looks insane.
Do you think that the people who watch the film will have different feedback as the film goes on? Because specifically at the end, there is this last montage where we have this kind of hopeful ideas of some dates where we've been able to do this or able to do that, and those dates are not that far off from 2023. And if they do not happen, and people in 2040 or 2030 watch the film, how do you think that they will view then?
Yeah, it's a good one. So when we were inventing this sequence, we had the same thought, like, isn't this going to make our film age really badly? Because even in 10 years, it's going to seem wrong. So yeah, probably that's going to happen. It's probably going to age badly. So watch it now. I think from the world of things that we wrote in the script in 2018, 19, 20, and then compared to now and compared to in 5 years, there's some things that have already changed a lot. No? The two anecdotes from that world. When I first started thinking about this film and how I should do it, it's ages ago. It's almost 10 years ago. And I kind of started with the premise to say there is a biodiversity crisis happening and nobody knows. But by the time you shot the film in 2019 and 20, we had to change that, and we had to say there's a biodiversity crisis happening. Everybody knows, and nobody knows what to do about it. No, that has changed so much in the last 10 years. Or another thing, like we said earlier about the believability of images, that for the film we imagined this scene where there's these kids in the future and they see this image and they don't know if it's real, so they don't believe it, and so they just discredit the whole idea of nature's beauty because they don't have it in reality, and the images they don't trust, so it's gone for them. And again, like now came Midjourney and artificial intelligence this year, really like to be used by everybody, and that seems to be almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. That if you imagine someone who grows up in the city in 15 or 20 years and never gets a chance to go out because maybe it's a poor family that never goes out, they will not know the wild, and they will not know what is to be lost. So they are also lost for the fight. How they're going to fight for something they don't even know or believe or even grasp. So this is something I'm worried about, and this is what we were trying to do with this film, really to say, be interested because it's the coolest thing there is, and then fight.
This is for me a little bit more personal because it was a detail that really touched me, which is how by the end of the film we're shown this poem as an ending, and I want to ask, why did you choose to use that poem? Like, I even paused the frame to read it again and again. It was so nice to me. Like,
Oh, so cool. Well, I'm going to let the person know who wrote it. This is my co-author, Aisha Prigan. And we would spend a lot of time trying to write this poem. It's in the beginning and at the end. You can actually glue them together, the opening poem and the closing poem, and they make sense together if you do that. Yeah, I mean, this is because we wanted to be a fairy tale, and often fairy tales have this kind of rhyme structure. So we thought, as the poem happens in the two moments when the fairy tale part is the strongest, that's why it's there. And if I'll see if I can get. Do you still have it? Do you have it by heart? Can you? It's like when we looked
By
at the
heart.
future, it was. I think it's, and when we
It's
looked at the
called.
future, it was black, and when we looked at the past, it was gold. But the hue of the present was hidden to us until this tale was told. So basically, the future looks black, the past looks amazing, but what does the present look like? It's hard to tell. That's what the poem says.
Also, I wanted to ask if, because there is this, focus on the message and the environmental aspect of it, but the truth is that we have this trio of friends, and do you feel you didn't explore their relationship as much?
When in the editing room, we were there thinking like, okay, we have three ways. Either we make a very, very long movie, 3 hours, then we can have everything, or we make a normal sized movie, but then we have to either make it more about the documentary discourse or more about the story. And decided for the documentary discourse. And when I look at it, I assume your question comes from that place where I look at it and I go like, oh man, we shot all this cool stuff. Like they had all these things going on, their friendship and all this stuff. And it's only some of it is in the movie. So that's something I look with a smiling and a crying eye now these days. That the decisions sometimes you have to take in the editing suite are sometimes very tough. So much good stuff that nobody's ever going to see.
I believe you. I've been told that being an editor, it's not looking at what's good, it's looking at what's better.
There's also another fact that might be interesting. We started shooting this film. We went over budget very quickly. In the first few days, we already realized, we're burning through the budget way faster than we should. We stopped halfway through the shoot. We rewrote the script in order for it to be cheaper and then carried on shooting. And that also was a heavy blow to some of the fictional logic and to some of the sort of characters, let's say. There were also more characters. For example, the guy in the secondhand store, the boss of Ben's, who's like this old guy, he's still in the film, but he kind of doesn't come back in the end, right? Huge technical mistake. Like, how can you have a character in the beginning and then he's not coming back in the end? I hope nobody minds too much, but it's a total flaw of this film, and this has to do with how we had to structure the second half of the shoot. So it's always this, no? You try, you aim for something, and you might not reach all of the things you aim for, and you might have to win the fight with whatever means possible. And in that case, it meant rewriting and changing things.
Do you feel that your other two films were stepping stone to this one?
Yes, really was. The first film, it deals with something completely different. It deals with it's a coming of age story of a sort of rebellious subculture in socialist Germany in the 80s. Completely different sujet. But it also, stylistically, it does something similar where it mixes documentary with fiction, and also aesthetically, it mixes all these different formats. So it was really like a warm-up almost to this one. That I already knew that, yes, you can mix all these things and it's possible to make it work. And also, yes, you can go venture out into a space, into a writing space where you mix fact and fiction. And your audience is intelligent enough to filter those two things into a thing that's true. You know, that this is an ongoing long discussion that if you're in film school, you discuss this a lot. No? What's the difference between truth and fiction and fact? And I think oftentimes you can come with a lot of facts and not reach the truth, or you can come with a lot of fiction and reach the truth. And so I think truth is really what a film should be after, and not facts, because that's journalism. Then it's good to read a newspaper. That should be only facts. But film is art, and that's why truth, I think, is what it needs to be after. And so, to answer your question, the first film I played around with that concept, and this one again. So yes.
You also talked about your relationship with the actors. I mean, being a director, one of your biggest job, I believe, is being able to direct them. Is there any tips you'd like to share?
No, because
No.
I'm not there. Ask me in 15 years. I'm learning and I'm doing my best. And I mean, be respectful, listen, don't be an asshole about your vision, because in the end, it's a team effort. Be clear about your vision, because they need that. They have all these questions. If you don't have answers, nobody gets anywhere. So be clear what you want, but don't be an asshole about it.
With that being said, is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
Go out, go out,
Go out.
open your eyes, experience all the stuff that's out there, and vote for the right political things, because democracy is in crisis. If we don't vote for the right people, things are not going to change. So vote, please go vote. Thanks for watching then, dear people who watch this. Get in touch. Oh, also one thing, as this film has somewhat of a educational effect, hopefully, and it has been used already in schools and universities quite a bit. If you, dear person in the audience, feel that this film should be watched by people you know, maybe by your class in school, maybe by your club, maybe by your family, and you want to put on a screening, get in touch with us, because we will do that. We will help. It's not like we are non-profit. We're not an NGO, and we live off that. And but we understand that with this project, it doesn't make sense to ask money every time. And if it's a university class or whatever, like, who just says we want to watch this film in class and talk about it, we will totally make that happen. So get in touch.
That's really, really perfect and nice. Respect. Thank you so much, really.
Thanks a lot, Maria. That was really a really cool conversation, really cool questions, and I enjoyed a lot. So thanks and bye to everybody. Let's stay in touch.